You've no doubt been across this budget. You're not that isolated, Treasurer. What do you think about it? Did the Commonwealth Government, give you the incentive that you asked for to privatise further assets in New South Wales?
No, they didn't, Laura, but I think there's some certainly positive aspects that have come through the budget, and namely is the economic growth forecasts that have returned. But some of the initiatives that we've obviously called for in the past, further investment in infrastructure in our state's incredibly positive. But I think a whole lot of those measures, particularly support for families in areas like childcare, will have a significant impact for working families across our state.
The budget, as always, makes a number of assumptions. Many of them never come true. One of the assumptions is that premiers will keep their borders open. That might be all right for your state, but are you confident the other premiers will follow suit?
Well, it's probably a bit of a heroic assumption if past performance is any indication of future performance, Laura. But look, as I've always said on this program, we've got to learn to live alongside the virus. There's going to be outbreaks from time to time in every state, and we need to do whatever we can to make sure we're rowing in the same direction and working as a country, not as a penal colony. And I think some of those assumptions are there, but they've changed a bit from last year as well, particularly I think also on the international borders, which I think will have a substantial impact on our economy.
Are the expectations that the government can't necessarily tell us when that we will get back to some kind of pre-normal, pre-COVID normal travelling life, but do you expect the federal government to at least tell us how, with targets and a pathway?
Well, look, we definitely need, Laura, a clear path forward. We need a roadmap to open Australia back up to the world. And, we had an assumption last year with the federal government that we would have international borders open in the December quarter. The budget papers yesterday indicated that will be back towards June next year, but there's still no clear roadmap or strategy to get there. And I think that needs to be communicated more clearly, because it's a difficult conversation, because we'll be one of the few countries in the world that will be opening up and letting the virus in. But at that point in time, you'd want to have the majority of the population vaccinated. But unless we set those targets, even if we fall short, at least there's a direction that we know we're heading. And that's not just important for governments, it's important for businesses and for citizens to know where the future is.
Indeed, Treasurer. Why are you the only one saying this, except for maybe, say, for the Business Council?
I just think it's pretty obvious. If we don't, these are difficult conversations. And I saw the Prime Minister come out the other day and say that Australians aren't interested in opening international borders. Well, that might be the case. And it might not be a comfortable discussion point, but we can't sit here closed to the rest of the world indefinitely. We need to set a target. We need to have a roadmap. And our economic growth and further security is obviously incredibly relevant to when those international borders open. So we may fall short. We may fall short of a date that we set, but that's okay. We need to know what success looks like. We need to know where the strategy is and how much of the population that is required to be vaccinated then leads to those borders reopening. But if we don't set a date, if we don't have a plan, then we'll just meander, along.
Well, it was really interesting to hear Gladys Berejiklian this week say that she is really ambitious for the state of New South Wales. She's moving ahead of the government's timeline for vaccines, opening up for expressions of interest. Now, you're preparing your own state budget at the moment. Are you working on plans as the vaccination gets rolled out in New South Wales to move ahead of the constraints of the Commonwealth? Could you possibly offer something like home quarantine in New South Wales, depending on vaccines, or something of the like?
Yeah, look, we're open to any ideas and policy proposals, Laura, that will drive economic growth and opportunity for people in our state. And more recently, we've been working very closely on international students. We've taken our own approach to that because we see this as a critical part of the New South Wales economy. And whatever we can do to look at ways to get the population vaccinated as quickly as possible, we will. And we've also said we're not going to worry about the dollars in relation to this. We want to work with the federal government to get this program rolled out as quickly as possible. This is not about jurisdictional issues between where the federal government has control and where we do. Whatever's going to assist this program getting implemented as quickly as possible, we want to support. But the other issue that's not getting raised. I mean, if you look at, and the Federal Treasurer raised this point well last night. There's some really positive news out of this budget. When you go back to what we're looking at last year, unemployment rate of around 15%, that's what we're staring at. To be in the position we are now is incredibly positive. But ironically, the biggest issue on the ground right now, when you're talking to the business community, is labour shortages and access to skills. So if we don't work through this vaccination program as quickly as possible and don't have a roadmap where we can open international borders, there's going to be some other challenges that come our way that we may not have thought of last year.
Well, Treasurer, we thank you for your time. We'll speak to you again there live from isolation. This is the most company
I'll be out by then,
you've had
hopefully.
in days, I'd say. Yeah, I think so.